Good afternoon to all of you. It is great to have you in our third spring webinar organized as part of the European funded project Spring. It is great to see such a big number of participants, and I can see more people joining us in the next few minutes. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Rania Labaki with us from EDEC Family Business Research Center and EDEC Business School. I would like to say a few words about Rania's background before I give the floor to her. My name is Celia Hadjikristodoulou. I'm the founder and managing director of Brand Expert Consulting, and I'm part of the project management team that is implementing our Spring project, one of the biggest ever projects funded by the European Commission in the area of family business, and more specifically in the area of family business succession. So a few words about our great speaker today. We're very pleased to have Rania with us. Rania Labaki is an associate professor of management at the EDEC Business School and the director of the EDEC Family Business Research Center. And she's a family business fellow at Cornell University. She's a board member of IFERA, a family business advisor at Landsberg, Gerskirch and Associates, and the head of the academic committee of FBN France, of the Family Business Network in France, and a co-editor of Entrepreneurship Research Journal. Her current research, advising and teaching interests revolve around the interplay between family dynamics and decision-making, governance design, and development of responsible owners. She's a recipient of numerous awards recognizing her contribution to the family business field, including the Barbara Hollander Award in 2020. So it's a great pleasure and an honor to have Dr. Rania Labaki with us, where she will be talking about the topic of managing intergenerational dynamics towards building resilience in the family business. We would love to have your comments, questions, ideas in the chat during Rania's talk. And of course, she will also provide you with the opportunity to ask your questions after her presentation is complete. And during the presentation, we will all have the chance to interact with Rania and make this a very interesting and lively webinar. So thank you all for being with us. And Rania, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sia, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this 2-hour training webinar on a very important topic for family business resilience and continuity, which is intergenerational dynamics. So today, what we are going to aim for is to address those dynamics among generations towards the relationships, towards increasing confidence, ensuring healthy coexistence between generations, and preventing or managing conflicts. Here's what you will be expecting also, because we will be drawing together a roadmap to address those critical intergenerational issues. We will follow the following path. First, increasing awareness. Second, reflecting all together, and then preparing and educating about the topic. So our first objective will be to raise awareness of the critical intergenerational dynamics in terms of challenges, with a focus on the managerial succession process. The second objective is to provide reflection frameworks to prepare and educate. And the third one is to provide insights to prevent, identify, and to deal with the main conflicts. Please keep in mind that this will be a highly interactive session, so you will be solicited throughout the session to intervene, to give your opinion, basically through certain polls. So to start with, I would like you to either open a new window on your computer, but to make it more easily, maybe it's better for you to go to your phone. and to just type in the link that you can see on the screen, that you will be also able to see on the chat. So Celia will perhaps put again the link so everybody can see it. So I'll just give you 30 seconds so you can type in this link, and I will ask you to keep the page open because we will be having several polls throughout the session. And if you have any issue with this, let us know. So we just need to enter your name, and you will be ready to go. Rania Labaki 034. Okay, so hoping that everybody's on board, I will be moving forward. Again, if you have any questions, let us. So the start of this session will deal a little bit with the changes that any individual, any institution go through, but are particularly relevant in the current situation that we are undergoing right now. Heraclitus, many centuries ago, considered that the only thing that is constant is change. And we know that change is part of life, but in the same time, individuals go through this change, but they pass away, they die, that's life. At the same time, the institutions remain, and basically the institutions that are created by men. So the idea is to reflect together on the first call given the codes. So the first one is the following. So you can check your window open with a link that I provided you with. And I would ask you to just type in your answers. What type of institution survived the most over the centuries, according to you? So there will be a word cloud appearing on the slide here. So take a few seconds and start by providing your answers. You can provide several answers, but basically I'm interested in the most solid institution across centuries. Okay, great. So we can see already a tendency in terms of answers. So we have the family that appears, it's the biggest word as it appears, and it's the most redundant answer that we have so far, followed by government, church, or religious institutions, I guess. Then we have wineries, clergy, families again. All right, so indeed, if we think about the institution that survived the most and basically the oldest institution, we would think about the family, actually. Thanks for answering this first one. Yes, so whatever the country, whatever the origin of the family, that's the basics of humanity. And interestingly, the family, of course, it endured lots of changes in terms of structures, but at the same time, the family as a basic unit of society has remained. So that's interesting thing to tell. We all come from families, right? So let's think together about the coming question. So now I would like you to think about the most fulfilling experience you had, if you're a family business member, you had observed in relation with the family business. Okay, so just try to remember the most fulfilling experience and tell us, according to you, what are the most important outcomes of that experience. So if you're a consultant, for instance, you can just reflect on a consultancy case or a family business and just go back. I think 20 more seconds. Your finance.
Yeah, Rania, we cannot hear you very well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now yes.
Okay, sorry for that. All right, so we can see here that in terms of most fulfilling experience and the outcomes of such an experience, most of the time the emotional outcomes are the ones that count the most. So whether it's in a family business setting, because we are family members, or as consultants or educators, sometimes observing family business behaviors, we can see that the emotional part is very important. So that was about the most fulfilling experience, which means that the most positive experience. So now let's move a little bit towards the dark side and think about a crisis that affected the family business. Again, either the family business would belong to or a family business that we are thinking about. And tell me about the most challenging issues to manage uh, during that crisis. For those who are just joining, we'll put again perhaps the link in the chat, the Polev link, so you can connect and you can participate into the poll questions that are going on. So again, here we can see that the most important issue to manage is being financial. Let's see whether that's interesting. It depends, of course, on the type of crisis we are considering, right? So in the family business, we don't only have financial crisis. We sometimes have family crisis that impacts the business. And depending on the type of crisis, the challenging issue will be either mostly emotional or either mostly financial. But most of the time, it's not black or white. It's a mix between emotions and between financials to manage. So both emotions and financial intertwine when it comes to crisis situations. Thanks for answering. We are moving forward. And to reconsider the three circle model that you have already, for those of you who attended the previous sessions, have already seen. As you may remember, or you will just learn, a family business is composed by two main systems, which are the same in any kind of business: the ownership system and the business system. They interact with each other. But in addition to that, we have the family system, right? And the family brings with it lots of good news because lots of strength to the business in terms of spirit of sacrifice, the long-term view, patience, patient capital, which are strong points for family businesses and which oftentimes enable them to have better performances than other businesses. At the same time, it's like Achilles' heel. It has additional challenges, and those challenges are also mixed with emotions, as I just mentioned previously. Now, what is interesting to consider here is that we all come from families, but when families are involved in businesses, sometimes what happens in the business will heighten the stress and the tension in the family, and vice versa. So families can, once in business, can really impact the relationships among family members. And this is particularly true because family businesses are not static systems. They do evolve over time. And when they evolve, things change, of course. And for them to remain strong, to remain with good performances, there needs also to be some adaptation to change. As this cartoon tells us, we're just like one big happy family here. When families are happy, families and business particularly are happy, they're all alike, basically. As I said, they provide lots of strength to the family business. The problem is when families are unhappy, when there are emotional dysfunctional issues, then each has its own way, each family has its own way of expressing such emotional issues, but also dealing with these emotional issues. Actually, families are also very complex systems, right? So let's consider now some examples of family businesses, and I would like you to reflect on those examples and tell me, according to what you know, which businesses are no longer controlled by the founding. So here we have Lacoste, Hermes, Gucci, and the Wall Street Journal. So you can provide several answers or just one answer as you see. I can see that no one has. Can you first mute your mics because we have some sounds. Make sure that everybody's mics are muted, please. Thank you. Okay. Maybe you can help me with muting those whose mics are not muted. Thank you. So, which businesses are no longer controlled by the founding family? So, actually, it's the Lacoste family from France, the Gucci family from Italy, the Wall Street Journal from the US. The Hermes family has encountered some threats a few years ago from LVMH, who was trying to gain more control of the business. But in the end, the family shareholders managed to reconsider their shareholders agreement and stay united in the face of this external threat. At the same time, as you just answered, you know, there are three families, prominent family businesses actually, which are no longer controlled by the founding family. So now my question, subsequent question is the following. What is, according to you, the main reason behind the sale of those three family businesses? So they do still exist, but they have been sold to outsiders. So what is the main reason? Financial performance, increasing market competition, traditional and outdated processes, dysfunctional family dynamics. Okay, great. So indeed, 60% of you have answered dysfunctional family dynamics. Then actually, that's one of the correct answers because those businesses were rather doing well in terms of performance, were rather competing well in the market. Their processes were based on traditions, but they always managed to reinvent themselves. So the family dynamics were dysfunctional. That's what led the family members to sell their shares. So the families are no longer family businesses. So all this brings us basically to the topic of today, which is intergenerational dynamics. So family businesses actually over time they tend to become dysfunctional on the intergenerational dynamics side. And particularly when it comes to succession, those emotions and those dynamics threaten the continuity of the business. So actually some, basic facts that you must have heard of. Only 30% of family and businesses survive into the second generation, around 12% to the third, and around 3% to the fourth generation and beyond. And again, most of the research shows that the main reason behind this is dysfunctional intergenerational dynamics. So over time, family businesses encounter some threats based on those dynamics, and it's very important also to keep in mind the importance of taking time and preventing this from happening and managing this. An interesting code actually reflects the tendency for families to put aside those dynamics when they're unhealthy, not to deal with them, to silence them in a way. But at the same time, since they're not doing so, when they call up consultants, it's too late to make important changes. So consulting with families and business is often like joining a Shakespearean play at the beginning of the last act, according to Astrakhan and Macmillan. So keep in mind that we need to start working on those dynamics early on to be able not, to come to a Shakespearean ending. At the same time, it's true that the statistics show very low rates of survival of family businesses because of those dynamics. At the same time, we have century-old businesses that managed to survive and to thrive and to thrive over centuries. So what is the secret behind the Malario family in the jewelry since 1613? The Zamil Group, again, more than 100-year-old, the Hilton Hotels and Resorts, Tabasco from Mexico, private bankers who are in company, or Hochi Ryokan in the hotel industry from Japan. So all these, which is one of the oldest actually family businesses in the world. So what makes those businesses in the end survive and thrive over centuries? Those businesses are characterized by resilience, right? And the main title of the presentation today was, managing intergenerational dynamics towards achieving resilience, right? So how do we do that? Resilience is basically composed of 5 dimensions that I will be showing you here. So first of all, for family businesses to create resilience, they need to be exposed to adversity. And the adversity needs to be viewed as a shared challenge among family members. The adversity can be a financial crisis, can be a health crisis in the family, it can be an identity crisis, it can also be, the current pandemic that we are all going through. So when family members are all exposed to an adversity, this triggers the seeds of potential resilience that the family can start building. Jackson has mentioned the terminology, has coined actually the terminology homeostasis, the family homeostasis, which means that when a family is hit by adversity, it sometimes gets unbalanced. So the equilibrium, the initial equilibrium of the system is shaken. So the family needs to find new ways to be able to go back to that equilibrium, or the family needs to go back to certain rules, existing rules that the family has learned from previous generations or from previous experiences on how to deal with such adversities, and apply those rules to be able to go back to that equilibrium. So family members basically contribute to building resilience when faced with adversity based on their own experience, but also on the experience of the previous generations and the experience of past crises that they have been through. So this is very important because when we talk about family businesses, that managed to from one generation to the other, those businesses, especially in the current crisis, proved to be more resilient. And they're more resilient because the current generation has managed to learn lessons from past crises, sometimes which happened, 100 years ago or even more than a century ago, and apply those learning to the current crisis. So those businesses have a very precious history and past that they can lean on to be able to, continue. So this is, one way to do it. But for this to be happening, we need also healthy intergenerational dynamics. So we have that first dimension, which is the exposure to adversity. We have the dynamic process, which is characteristic of resilience. We have a positive adaptation to this adversity. And we have also an outcome out of it, which is a system which is more strengthened and which is more resourceful. And of course, this resilience is not static. It will be able to develop and sometimes get even stronger over time, uh, and particularly over the life course of the individuals, of the family business as a whole. So, intergenerational dynamics, when they are managed properly, uh, are able also to support the resilience of the family business and even, nurture that resilience so those family businesses can survive and not be threatened by any, outside attempt of gaining control of the business. Now, we are going to dig even more deep into the family system to be able to understand how the family system functions and interacts with the business so we can, work on those relationships. Families are not, simple systems. As I said, complex systems as well. And as Einstein has put it, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And actually, we are going to spend most of the time during the session today to think about the problem because the solutions, are something that we will be able to pick from in the end once we understand what's going on. So we're going to play a little bit the detective between generations to see how to help them and support them best. And for this, I will share with you a family business tale. The characteristic of this family business tale is that it will unfold over three generations, and it was actually written in one of the very first academic articles that dealt with family business characteristics. As some of you might know, family business field, like from a research perspective, is a pretty young field, around 30 years ago started. So to be able to trigger the interest of the readers, Kes de Vries, who is one of the prominent psychoanalysts and expert in family business as well, has started with a tale. So I will share with you this tale, and then I would like you to reflect with me around it. This is a typical tale, actually, so that's why it's worth thinking about it. So. Once upon a time, there was a potter who made the most beautiful pottery in the world. Everyone who saw his pottery immediately fell in love with it and wanted to buy it. As a result, the potter's shop flourished and became known far and wide. After some time, demand for his products became so great that he found it impossible to do all the work himself. The potter started a factory and hired people to help. As the years went by, he employed more and more workers. Eventually, the potter spent all day managing the factory. He no longer had time to make pottery. Sometimes he longed for the good old days when things seemed so much simpler and he did everything himself. He didn't really like to be so dependent on others, since very few people could live up to his standards of. Fortunately, his children were now older and had begun giving him a hand. They became increasingly helpful in managing the business. Although the potter was reluctant to let go, he began to realize that he really had no choice. His health and endurance were no longer what they used to be. But he wanted to keep the business and the family. He liked to see the family name on the building. For him, the business was a way of keeping the family together. After all, the reason for having worked so hard was to create a better life for all of them. When the potter died, he left the company to his two sons and only daughter. The pottery plant and the sales outlets continued to prosper under their guidance. More and more plants opened. The operation expanded across borders and diversified into related products such as glass, crystal, and silverware. When the children's children became older, they were also brought into the business. Unfortunately, with so many family members around, things started to go downhill. The original family cohesiveness began to unravel. There were periods when those who could remember times past would think nostalgically of the good old days when the old man was in control. Everything had seemed so much simpler then. Everyone knew who was in charge. The cousins and siblings began to argue about money, shares, power, and responsibilities, who got what and who made what. Envy reared its head. Eventually, what had started as mere bickering degenerated into bitter feuding. The two brothers and the sister, their wives, husband, and children spent all their time and energy fighting. Employees were forced to choose one of the many factions. Soon, the most capable employees began to leave. Product quality decreased and customers stopped buying. In the end, the strife, bankruptcy for the company, and the loss of the family member's personal fortune. Thus ended the potter's dream, the family having gone from rags to rags only 3 generations. So this is a common problem, actually, that family businesses face. And if you think about the statistics that I've shown you before, this also explains, more in depth what can go wrong in family businesses. So now I would like you to move on to the poll and to reflect on this tale, but also maybe on your own experience. And just try to type in, and we'll have a word cloud appearing here, about the challenges that you think the current generation has in relation with succession. So for those who joined, you can see on the slide that the link that you need to connect to. So we can see also some interesting answers coming in. So we can see lack of trust, difficulty to commit, differences in the vision, no vision, communication, authority, letting go authority, old school thinking, miscommunication, fear. You can see fear also appearing. Yes, very, very interesting answers. Yes, they're seeking recognition, indeed. Underestimation, conflicts, we can see also conflicts, commitments, communication. So indeed, if we look what the research tells us, and this tale was just, one example, which was, a very typical example, is that the current generation in regards to succession usually has inability to delegate and share power. There is so much attached to the family business, which has they created. And we have seen the founder of the pottery business in the beginning. He wanted to do everything himself until he really realized that he's getting, old and not able to do everything himself. Inability to let go, the reluctance to plan succession, the reluctance also to train successor, because some of them would think that by training successors it's part of their power that they're going to lose, and the lack of trust in successors' abilities. The business is often seen as, the baby, a baby for the founder of the business, particularly. So letting it go to the next generation is risky, because they don't want their baby to be hurt and to disappear. So for them, they feel so much attached to the business and to their previous power status that they have difficulty to letting go. So these are the common problems for the current generation. So when we think about family businesses, actually, we don't only think about the financial needs of the family members in business. So it's not only about, the founder interested in, financial rewards. It's also about socio and emotional needs. Whether we're talking about the founder, or we're talking also about, other generations where we have very powerful in charge. Because basically, the current generation has emotional needs and has also social needs. They want also to keep the good relationships with the society, with the employees, the status they have also in the society, and the fact that they are going to be replaced in a way through succession will lead them to lose that kind of prestige. And they have also emotional needs. They want to be loved like anyone, but they want also to be in charge of their fate. So they're afraid that by letting go, this will all go away. So when we think about, the challenges that the current generation faces, we need to think about both objectives that they are going to seek through the family business, which are financial objectives, but also socio and emotional objectives in relation with the family, in relation with the business stakeholders. As I mentioned, the employees, the family members, of course, the partners, the clients, the suppliers, society at large. Now, I would like you to reflect with me on the challenges that the next generation uh, faces regarding succession. So again, just type in your answers and we'll see a word cloud appearing. Okay, so we can see that the challenges revolve around identity issues, around also mentality like innovation, tradition, proving themselves, proving their ideas. Yeah, and making change happen and taking over, the roles of the previous generation, probably. Fear from underachieving as compared to the previous generation as well. Indeed, these are all important challenges, and the research actually, leads us in the same direction. So the next generation would, try to consider the problems of, how do I do to not only feel, entitled for the job or for the position, but prove that I am completely legitimate because of my competencies. Also, the challenges regarding identity and their roles beyond, just being the son of or the daughter of. The challenges regarding credibility, regarding commitment, regarding their leadership abilities, and also their decision-making capabilities. So both on the next generation side and the current generation side, there are critical issues that they have, and those issues, as you can tell, are not hard issues. There are soft issues. There are issues in relation with the psychology, but also issues regarding how the next generation is going to explain to the current generation about all the challenges and make the current generation aware about these, and vice versa, how the current generation is able to make the next generation understand all the problems they're facing themselves. So we have real intergenerational issues here to solve, especially when it comes to succession. Now, I will move on and share with you a case, a short case. So we'll be reading this case. I would ask you to be attentive, and I will be asking questions. I will try to resolve that case altogether. So it's a very simple case, but it's inspired by a true and a typical story. So the first part of the case, so we are in Germany. So it takes place in Germany. It's a winery business. So William Burlap, the only son of the third generation of Burlap, a winery business based in rural Germany, was not interested in taking over the business from his father. When confronting the family with his decision to study art and design instead of business management, the disappointment of all family members was high, albeit not outspoken. Since the 50s, the heir and leader of the winery was always selected based on primogeniture, despite the fact that William had two sisters which were as capable as him to study business and follow a leadership path. He had to reconsider his decision. Being raised on the traditional values of his predecessors, he had feelings of obligation to respect the will of the family and abide by their expectations. Consequently, so although he wanted to study art and design, he changed his plans and enrolled into a top business school in the US, paid by his father. Back in Germany, after graduation and a short-term experience in a multinational firm, he was pressed by his father to take over his managerial position in the family business. Soon thereafter, the son felt confused and conflicted as for the cultural differences pertaining to what he had learned in the Anglo-Saxon corporate world and the actual situation in his family business. The weight of traditions, informal arrangement, non-professional management led him several times to riffles with his father, as well as with other senior employees in the business who see him as an intruder wanting to impose his American view of the world. While William recognized fundamental differences in values, beliefs, and goals with his father, he did not raise the issue with him or other family members, but started doubting himself. Since the father is well respected for his wise business decisions in the past, the son believed that his father was probably right and became more and more submissive to his father's wishes. In addition, the father gradually extended his paternalistic leadership style on the private life. For example, he started suggesting his son to date with the daughter of another family winery owner. The father stressed the benefits of a potential marriage both for the business growth as well as for the timely upbringing of the next generation to take over the business in due time. Additionally, in times of gender equality movements, William's sisters decided to stand up for themselves by claiming a managerial role in the family business on an equal foot to their brother. They have long been silenced by their father, who openly treated his children unequally. Their envy kept on growing since a very young age, as William was always the one to get praise and support, up to financing his studies abroad, while the daughter had to pursue studies in art and literature at the only local university. Facing these family, business, and personal dilemmas, the son was getting more and more unhappy and depressed. So here is, in a nutshell, the burlap case that we are going to examine together and to try to decipher what happened and how can we make this family, keep going and heal intergenerational relationships. So for this, I will introduce you to certain concepts, certain principles, certain frameworks. The first one relates to the current generation. So the first thing we need to consider in any family business case when it comes to succession issues is what are the characteristics of the current generation. So we mentioned previously that there are problems that the current generation faces, but not all members of the current generation have the same attitude towards those problems. So the research identifies mainly 4 different attitudes that I will share with you, and then I will ask you to pick the one that characterizes William's father attitude, and we'll go to discuss which attitude is the most beneficial for succession. So basically, those archetypes allows us to tell how would the current generation consider retiring from the family business and letting go for the next generation to take over. So the first archetypes, we can call it the enlightened ambassador. So basically, this current generation is very open to sharing their experiences with the next generation members, and also to be patient and lead the way for them to take over on time. And they are also willing to let go on time, which means to retire from the family business when the next generation is fully equipped and capable to take over. So this is the enlightened ambassador. The second archetype is the troubled monarch. So the troubled monarch actually is a little bit conflicted because he or she wants to let go, but in the same time have difficulties letting go. So basically, they will be promising the next generation to retire someday and to provide them with all they need to be able to deal with the family business as heads of the business. But in the same time, they will stick to their chair and they will stay there forever. So this is a troubled monarch. And then we have the malicious general. So here I have put the picture of Henry Ford, was one of the archetypes of managers who actually do not really pretend wanting to retire and let go, but will give the opportunity for the next generation to prove themselves while putting them in very difficult situations. For example, Henry Ford will give impossible missions to his son and will ask his son to deal with very difficult situations, which are hopeless situations, to be able to show him that he is not a capable person, so he can stay on board. So this is unfortunately a typical example and common example of current generation members who would stay on board and not let go by pushing the next generation to the edge and not allowing them basically to prove themselves, but rather crushing their possibilities. And the fourth archetype is the restful governor. It's about current generation members who will let go very easily once the retirement age comes, but they will not be there to support the next generation when passing the baton. So they will let the next generation deal with their own challenges and with no particular support. So these are the different archetypes that the current generation can have. And as I mentioned, the unhealthy archetypes are unfortunately more frequent than the healthy archetypes. So the first question to you is, what archetype did you identify in the burlap case? So William's father, what is he like? Is he like the ambassador, willing to let go and supporting the next generation on the way? Or like the monarch, pretending that he wants to let go but sticking to his chair? Or rather, as Henry Ford, so putting lots of obstacles so that the next generation cannot succeed? Or rather, retiring very easily without support on the way for the next generation? So just a few more seconds. Yeah, indeed, you have all the right answer. Most of you. Okay, so let me pause here a little bit, and I would like to hear your voice a little bit here. Yes, it's rather the B answer, because basically William's father, asked him to come back and to start working the business as soon as possible. But in the same time, he's still there around, right? And he's trying also to force things in, to want to do things his own way, rather than providing some autonomy for his son to, prove himself and to introduce this new perspective, because he studied abroad in the US. So it's basically the B, not the D, because he is still basically around. He did not leave the business completely. So yeah, so I said I would like to hear from you, perhaps over the chat, and you can raise your hand and share openly with us with your mic. So what do you think are the pros and cons of those different archetypes, and what archetype is the best? Or do you think that maybe there's one which is more relevant in a particular situation than others? So just leave the floor for you a little bit to share with me what are the pros, cons, and what's the best archetype according to you. And also, if you have an experience to share around this, happy to hear you. Can see silence.
I would go. This is Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Hi, Rania. Very interesting. I would go, of course, for the enlightened ambassador. I found it much more interesting, and I very much believe in that. I believe very much in the strength of all people, and I would really help the second generation to really show us all the really good stuff that the new generation has to give to us, the older generation.
Thank you, Gina. Can you share with us a little bit about you? Are you from a family business?
Yes, I'm from Greece. I'm in a family business.
Yes.
Actually, I'm the second generation in the hotel business in Greece.
Yes.
I have three kids that they are now being educated, two daughters and one son. They're being educated in America and in Switzerland, and with all equal opportunities. And I very much believe in them. And I really, really, want to see me going out of the business and coaching them really to do the best things that I couldn't do, help them to see really differently, and give all the power and strength to move on the business.
Thank you so much, for sharing openly your background and your experience in this. And indeed, the research tells us that the enlightened ambassadors contribute to the succession process in a much more healthy way. But at the same time, it's not a one-sided operation. So now we will move on to the next generation archetype to try to understand also that we need also to consider what is the next generation like, because not all next generation members are alike, right? So what does the research tells us around this? So what would I as successor why would I, sorry, as successor pursue my career in the family business? And that's determining a little bit the motivation, which is key when considering intergenerational dynamics and succession. So we have 4 different types of motivation. Those who want to join the family business because they are effectively and emotionally attached to the family business. So they want to join the business because they are emotionally attached to the family business. There are those who ought to pursue their career in the family business because there are certain obligations that they see around, like they have sometimes they hold the family name, and I think it's very important for them to come and join the family business and to have this tradition, of family members, especially in family businesses where the family name is the same name than the business. And they also feel some responsibility towards the employees, and they consider that being there will maintain the culture and will maintain employment. So that's why they decide to pursue their career in the family business. Some of them will rather do some calculations, so they will join the business because, on a monetary perspective, it's more interesting for them to do so because, as compared to other businesses, they will earn more money. They sometimes will have better positions. So they think they have to because from a calculative side, it's more interesting. The fourth motivation comes from those who need to, which we call imperative commitment, because they don't have at all another choice, either because they don't have at all capabilities or because they have some personal issues which do not allow them to find, any other position in the business. So they don't have another choice. So here we have 4 different types of motivations. And the research shows that depending on the type of motivation that the next generation has, the success of the succession process and the performance of that successor once in the business will be different. So we need to also identify those different motivations to be able to move on. Okay. And in the same time, we also have, in addition to those motivations, we also have 3 different archetypes of next generation members. So the first one is the passive next generation member. So these are members who actually will join the business and will not initiate any change and will just be there to listen to what the current generation has to tell them and to abide by all what they ask them to do. So this is the passive next generation. We have also, on the other extreme, the overactive next generation. These are members of the family who actually have tons of ideas. They want to revolutionize the whole system, and they do not believe about how the processes are going on, and they want to make complete changes. So they come into the business and they question all the processes, sometimes all the products, and they want to make drastic changes. And then we have like a middle ground, the active next generation member, who actually will be there to initiate some processes, to come up with some fresh perspectives, some new ideas, while also being there and listening to what the current generation has to tell them, what's their experience like, and move on accordingly. So it's like more a balanced, let's say, perspective. So it's as important for us to understand what is the archetype of the current generation than to understand what is the archetype of the next generation, because we need to find a balance between all of them. We cannot, if we have the perfect current generation ambassador and we have, a passive next generation, sometimes it doesn't really fit, or we have an overactive next generation, sometimes doesn't fit. So there needs to be an adjustment of archetypes from the next generation part and from the current generation part, so things go more smoothly. So before moving on, let's reflect on the burlap case once again. And I would like to ask you, how would you describe William, the next generation in the burlap case? Is he a passive next gen, an active next gen, or an overactive next gen? Okay, I can see there's so most of you are considering him as a passive next gen, some of you as an active next gen. So that there's a fine line, because in the beginning when he came to the business, he was rather active. So he came with, goodwill and with some ideas, but very, very quickly those ideas were shut down by his father, and he moved to the passive next gen side. So that is true. That is true. So we have on one hand a monarch, which is kind of unhealthy situation. On the other hand, a monarch who managed to, push the next generation member to be rather passive. So we have kind of dysfunctional archetypes going on both sides. Now, I would like you to reflect on the type of motivation. Let me just. Yeah, type of motivation that you think would facilitate the succession process. At large. So we're not considering the burlap case, although I will reflect on it too. So just for you to remember the explanations, would the ones who have effective commitment, which means they are emotionally attached to the business, be good candidates to facilitate the succession process, or those who do it by obligation, or those who do it by calculations, or, because they don't have another choice? Okay, interesting. So actually, okay. Some of you consider that those who don't have another choice makes it possible for them to facilitate the succession process. So let's consider for a little while William. So William, if we think back about the case, he basically wanted to study art and design, right? But pushed by, his father, the traditions, and so on, he decided to study business, and he joined the business basically because he ought to, because he felt some obligation to do so. He did not do some calculations whether it's better or not to join that business or do something different. He didn't do it because he had no other choice. And he doesn't really seem so much emotionally attached to the business. So now I will move to another question, and then I will share with you the answers of, what is the best motivation to be. Before that, okay, let me give you some explanation and move to the question before. So as I mentioned, there are 4 different types of commitment. There are 3 different archetypes. And the research shows basically that it is very important for the next generation members, these are like what you see in red basically here, to have an emotional attachment to the family business, and to have also some feelings of obligations toward the family business, to have this notion of responsibility towards the employees, towards the family name, the family reputation, and so on. So when the next generation is motivated through this affective component, a normative commitment component, then the performance of the next generation as a successor is higher, and the succession process succeeds much better. Those who join the business because of calculations or because they don't have another choice usually do not have very good performances or sometimes fail in the family business. So we need to consider those two motivations. On the other hand, the research also shows those passive next generation members, those who accept the authority as it is, actually again do not contribute to the continuity of the family business, because once the current generation is not there anymore, then they will be lost and they will not be able to lead as they should. On the other hand, the overactive next generation members who won't have this revolutionary attitude do not do good for the business neither. So what is good is to have an active next generation members who recognizes the ambivalence of the current generation emotional feelings, and also difficulties sometimes of letting go, and also understanding the importance of traditions and innovating by building on the traditions that exist. So it is important, again, if you want to move into a successful intergenerational dynamic towards succession, we need also to motivate the next generation to have the right type of motivation and to have also the right attitude. So now we'll move to the previous question. What does it take, according to you, to make the next generation archetype more appropriate? So how do we move the next generation to the right, archetype? Values, transferring values. What else?
Rania, our screens have changed. We don't have the question anymore.
Okay, that's strange. Can you see the questions now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Rania, the screen has changed again.
Okay. And now?
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, so wow, we have great answers here coming in. Yeah, the communication, teaching, education, encouragement, guidance, exposure. Yeah, absolutely. Great answers. So, yeah. Again, the values, the mentorship, understanding, constant teaching, training. Yeah, so these are great answers, and I'll provide you with more details in a few minutes too. So it's very important.
Rania, we
Yes?
also have some answers in the chat if you want to review those as well. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know what happens, but I cannot access the chat. Maybe you can read them for me. Celia, please.
You would like to read the answers they've written there?
Yes, please.
Yes, we have from Mr. Joy Fitzpatrick. He says to prepare a proper family business charter to show the way forward.
Mhm.
And then we had some questions above saying that the question was gone and whether you could enable it. I think you've managed to work on this, right? It was enabled.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have this charter possibility indeed, pertaining to the fact that this charter would be written together with the next generation, because it's important to involve them. So it goes along the great answers that you all provided. And as I mentioned, I will go more in details in terms of what we call education, transfer of values, and also very early exposure, early on exposure, mentorship as well. So all this to tell that it's important to be conscious about the current archetype of the next generation, but also to help the next generation move towards the right archetype, and also to motivate the next generation. So next generation member cannot be emotionally attached to a family business if the current generation has never mentioned the family business before, have invited them to visit the business, encouraged them to do some internship. So it's also the role of the current generation to push the next generation to develop the healthy types of motivations to join, and not just do it because of some calculations, for instance. All right, thank you again for taking part in this. So now I will move to another important dimension regarding intergenerational dynamics, which deals with the family characteristics. And very briefly, I'm not going to talk a lot about theory, but very briefly, just for you to keep in mind that a family is basically a multi-generational and emotional system. And the behavior of the next generation members is very much dependent on the characteristics of the family per se. So in some instances, the family members will behave because of the characteristics of the system. So the system contains, norms that will dictate behavior, norms, which means how shall we behave in a certain situation, what emotions shall be expressed in certain situations, and what are the goals that we shall pursue, what are the values that we shall abide by. And this will lead the families to be different. So all families are not alike, and there are different degrees of what researchers call emotional interdependence, and that's what we will call individuation. So I will explain to you what individuation is, which is a key component of intergenerational relationships. So individuation basically means that any family members, while growing up, will become more and more responsible of making decisions. But in some families, family members would make decisions by leaning a lot on other family members' opinions, especially the elderly ones. Whereas in some families, when the individuals grow up, they will make decisions on their own without without taking into consideration the opinions of the other family members. And we have, of course, different graduations. So what you can see here basically is a scale of individuation, which means a scale of the emotional interdependence of some family members on each other. So to what extent, basically, William, if we think about the next generation case, to what extent William will make decisions by taking into consideration what his father thinks, rather than by taking into consideration what he would like to do, or what he aims for in the future. So we have this continuum. On one extreme, we have members which will be mimicking, copying, following completely other family members' thoughts, emotions, behaviors. And on the other hand, we have family members who will make decisions completely independently from other members' thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And of course, as I mentioned, we have graduations. And in the middle, we have those who will listen to what the previous generation has to tell them, but also listen to their hearts and what they would like to do themselves and try to find a fine balance. All right, so traditionally the idea would be that over time, when the family members grow up, they needed to find this balance rather than completely be mimicking, copying, and following the other members. And completely being independent also will make them lose some, strong points that the family member can provide them with, some experiences, especially when it comes to crisis. When it comes to crisis, those members will be completely lost because they will not be able to benefit from the other family members' support because they were doing everything completely independent. So now let's consider the burlap case. And I would like to ask you to think about particularly William. So what you would need to do is just click on the picture on the scale. And when you click, there will be a sign showing where you think that William stands on this individuation continuum. Is he completely copying, mimicking his father, what his father tells him to do? Is he finding kind of a balance? Is he completely independent? Just click on the picture. And normally I should be able to see your different answers. Let's see whether it works. Are you able to click on the picture or not? Oh, yes, it's working.
We're not in that. We can do it from our mobile phones. I don't know if people can do it from their laptop, but and also in the chat, people said no.
Yes, I'm logged out as well. Okay, no problem. So we have one answer that appears on the screen, but it's okay for you, just to reflect on this. And as you might, remember, first of all, when William wanted to decide about his studies, he did not at all, follow his own dreams by doing art and design. He ended up by following his father. Then when he joined the business, when he was doing things, his father would tell him how to do things and follow traditions. So he was kind of submissive to his father. And it also went further up until his father is trying to look for a wife for him and pushing him to marry the daughter of another winemaker. So really here we have an unhealthy relationship because William is standing on the wrong side of the individuation continuum. And so by reflecting on this, we can tell there's, a lot of work that needs to be done to be able for William to move towards at least, the center of the continuum and to be able to reflect on, what he really wants to do. And of course, this goes through communication, education, as you mentioned, and I will develop this further. But again, this is another tool, another way for you to reflect on the relationships among different family members. And we can even think about the sisters. Where do the sisters stand in there? Because they were also kind of in a different position than William, and now they would like to go into the business. But another there is also another issue, because the father is having a very close relationship with William, whereas the sisters are like rather on the other side of the continuum. They used to make their decisions, and now they want to change things up.
Rania, we have one comment in the chat.
Yes.
Again by Mr. Joy Fitzpatrick, saying that the son should be allowed to bring in fresh views into the business so that he could apply what he has learned. And by Peter, or Peter Jenner, the member of our team, growing up is from 1 to 2, guided by shared values.
Yes.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So
these are
yeah.
two of the comments we got.
Yes, great comments indeed. So yes, but at the same time, also from a gender perspective, we can see also that the business is traditionally being taken over based on primogeniture. So the eldest son, and this is also something traditional that needs to be also reconsidered. So there are lots of deep changes that needs to take place in the business. In the burlap case, for instance. So if you want to sum it up, and then we reflect on other things. So this winery, is rather traditional, conservative. Succession is based on primogeniture. But William is kind of paying the price. He's kind of stuck, although he had lots of abilities. And we can think that if the relationships are better managed, then he really can bring something great to the business, perhaps include his sisters in the whole thing, and move on accordingly. Okay, so now the last tool that I would like to share with you. You can see a matrix which maybe can frighten up some people, but actually it's very simple. So actually, this matrix reflects the type of the family that is involved in the family business. So basically, it tells us that there are two dimensions that allow us to decide what type the family is. The first one is cohesion. Cohesion is the level of the emotional bonding between family members, and it can be looked at on a continuum from disengaged family members, which means family members are completely disconnected emotionally from each other. On the other side of the continuum, we have enmeshed family members, which mean family members who are very, very tightly knit emotionally to each other. On the other hand, we have flexibility, which means the extent to which some family members are able to change their behaviors when there is a stressful situation. So their behaviors and their roles. And we can also see that there is a kind of continuum. Those families who are very chaotic, when there is a stress and adversity, they will go in different directions, and they will be leaderless, basically. And on the other side, we have those that are very rigid, which means that even though there is an adversity, there is a stressful situation, they are not willing to let go and to change the roles and responsibilities. And what you can see on the picture is we have dark blue squares, which quadrants, which reflect the completely unhealthy families that need family therapy to heal. I'm sorry. And we have the white quadrants, which are a middle ground. And then we have the light blue quadrants, which are the balanced family types, like the most functional types. So the question that I was planning to ask to you, so I hope that you are able to click this time on the picture. If not, just reflect on it. So where does the burlap family stand in this matrix? So in terms of emotional bonding between family members, is it completely disengaged? No emotional connection? Is it completely enmeshed? Is it separated or connected in between? And the same stance on the flexibility side. So when you cross the cohesion type and the flexibility type, we can have the family type. So we have a first answer of rigidly enmeshed, and this is kind of true, especially when we think about William and his father. So William does whatever his father tells him to do, and William's father does not want to change deeply things, and it's rather an authoritarian leadership style that he has. So yes, so again, if it's on the dark blue side, but of course, this is like just speculation, because to be able to really diagnose the right family type, there are scales and that are, meant to be felt so that we know exactly what type is the family. But just speculating, given the information that we have, we can tell that it's like really a dysfunctional quadrant of the matrix, and that things have really to change to be able to move towards this light blue middle ground. And what is interesting to tell is that there is work that needs to be done to balance the cohesion level of the family members on one hand, and also to start bit by bit changing the leadership roles. We cannot make changes overnight. We cannot, for example, from the rigidly enmeshed to the structurally connected overnight. We need first to move quadrant by quadrant, for example, to move to the structurally enmeshed first, and then move to the structurally connected, or to move to the rigidly connected and then to the structurally connected. So we need to start either working by working on the cohesion or working on the flexibility and taking it one step at a time. And it's a long process, doesn't happen overnight neither. So thank you for those who were able to click on the matrix. Now, what does it take to move to a balanced family type? So I would like you also here to reflect and to write in your answers. So basically, the idea is how to create a better level of flexibility and how to create a better cohesion. I can see that yeah, respect is very important. The first answer. Tolerance.
Rania, why is it asking me to log in for the question? Before it was automatic. Is it normal?
Yes. No.
You need an account
connect again.
You
Yeah,
can.
the
You need.
same for other people as well. The same for me as well, Rania.
Okay. Sorry.
You need an account before you can register with Rania.
I think more people have the same issue. So I think it's easier, Rania, if they just write their comments here in the chat. Already some of them are writing them down. And I will read it for you, or you can read it, whatever you like. Already Peter Jenner wrote, create a meritocracy. Other people are saying they have the same problem, that they need to log in with a password.
Okay,
I
that's
also
right.
had the same issue. So I logged out. Some people can still
We have
write.
one more question, so it's okay, no problem for this. Yeah, please. So creating meritocracy, that's an important point. What else, Celia?
Not to create an imbalance in the financial remuneration package, independent of the departmental responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have from Kevin saying that parents should talk and listen, and children should listen and talk.
Yes,
So
it's about communication.
Yes.
Yeah, and
different order, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, very good points, and we can see communication appearing very big on the screen as well. Mutual respect, constant exposure, understanding, flexibility, tolerance, openness, preparation. Yes, so communication is actually the key. So if we go back to the research and what the family therapy field tells us, to be able to move to healthier types of families, we need communication. I will move quickly here. So research basically tells us, for example, this is a research that was done on family businesses, that, you know, the higher the level of communication, you know, like here we move, the better the adaptability of the family business, the better the cohesion of the family business. So here we can really see that communication is the key component that the families need to play with to be able to improve the family type. And this will also help the individuation type, and also help in the other archetypes movements that we need to go through.
Rania, we have two more comments.
Okay.
To donate an equal number of shares in the business, and also from Professor Panicos Boujouris, respect, trust, unity, communication, professionalization, and governance.
Yeah, there's absolutely. These are all great suggestions. Yeah, I mean, communication is key, and one of the ways that we can contribute to communication is to educate both generations on understanding their archetypes and motivations, and also understanding how to better communicate, learning how to better communicate. So my last question for the day, please write on the chat if you have this issue with Polev. What kind of educational elements would benefit the next generation? So here I'm really asking you educational elements like, yeah, there's the values, but concretely, you know, if you would like to educate yourself and the next generation about all this, what kind of tools would you use? Family involvement, so involvement in the family.
We have a comment by Kevin saying leadership skills pass on to children.
Leadership skills. Mentoring, we can see also here mentoring.
I would say also strategic thinking, Rania.
Strategic thinking. You can see the values coming back again. Internship, great, also great point. Training. Great. So thank you all for your suggestions. So now I will be sharing a little bit what the research tells us again about the educational elements. And now we're moving. So we moved from the awareness part to the reflection part with those different tools. Now we're talking about the preparation and education. So what are the different education elements according to research that help in managing those intergenerational dynamics? So first of all, lectures on family businesses like this one, but beyond, of course. So in those lectures, it's important for both generations to be able to understand the theoretical background on family businesses, to, you know, go through some case studies of other businesses so they reflect on, you know, what's going on somewhere else, and then go back to their experience, learn from guest speakers, also from other testimonials. One-on-one coaching and feedback sessions. So providing personalized feedback by specific instructors trained in mentoring on family business issues. This will help as well. The development of a life plan. So encouraging basically the next generation members in this case to write essays to reflect on what they want to be, in certain number of years, starting by answering the question, who am I? So reflecting on their own identity. What do I want to do? And then how do I get there? And usually, again, it's good to have a kind of a coach or mentor in this process. What would also be very useful, according to research, is interviewing the family members. So basically, when the next generation members do not, get stuck on certain beliefs about what the current generation thinks or believes, but go and one step further and ask to interview them, ask them to tell their story, to tell, how they developed through their career, what were the challenges, what they know about the past generations. And this will help them also to understand better the whole process and contribute to it. So the interview around, those issues will really help, and also will create like a first basis for the communication ground between both generations.
We have a comment, Rania, from Mr. Joe Fitzpatrick, saying, which is relevant to what you're saying, is that the company should invest into a fund for the future generation to be spent in educational programs.
Yes, absolutely. And this is a practice which is increasingly used, especially by large families. And those large families sometimes dedicate special programs, even for the very young ones. Yesterday, I was on another panel, and the family business, which was more than 100-year-old, has created a committee for those who were 5-year-olds. So starting 5-year-old, a program to, gradually motivate and educate the next generation. And 20 years later, it's really bearing its fruits. So they're very happy with the outcome. So another education element which might prove useful is peer group discussion or even weekly sessions. So where they will meet other members of family businesses and discuss on a confidential basis the issues they faced and learn from each other's experiences. So basically, how practically this can help the next generation. Through the lectures, for example, they can, practically apply what they learn to their own business, their own families. They can also self-reflect by identifying their values, their beliefs, their personal career strategies, making sense of the different roles, and understanding the family history. And this will also help them normalize. So usually it's very common to see family members thinking that they're alone in the world, there's so many issues and nobody's able to understand what they're going through. But actually by, going through some educational tools, they will be able to understand they're not alone and that they can learn from others' experience. So normalizing is very important. And also learning how to better manage their emotions in the way. So, by interviewing, for example, the family members, they are able to understand their emotions, where the emotion come from, and to be more empathic towards those emotions rather than, feeling anger, or but trying to understand that this monarch basically he's behaving this way, the father is behaving this way because his father has behaved in the same way and he doesn't know another way to do things, and those patterns are transferred from one generation to the other. So not being angry about it, but rather trying to understand, and by talking about it, trying to make sense of things and change things. And also, this will impact the communication, obviously, overcome the barriers, facilitate conversations, and openly discuss key issues. And all this, will lead, according to research, because there have been educational programs done this way, which led to those outcomes. So this will help the family next generation member understand the family business attachment. Also have a better level of individuation and better manage expectations. Develop the trust with between the incumbent and the successor. Make the right career decisions and extend the temporal perspectives, the past, the present, and the future, and consider making intertemporal choices. So this is, like the final, let's say, educational framework that can help, start working and better managing these complex intergenerational dynamics by, analyzing their own situation and making a step forward. So to recap, and then we'll open it for a few questions. We have around 20 minutes left. So I would like you as family members or family business educators or consultants, lawyers, whatever your role and interest in family business, to reflect, first of all, how would, if you're thinking about a family business in particular, how would you describe the current generation in that family business? And how would you describe the archetypes of the next generation? And what does it take to move to a more healthy archetype? And you also now understand the motivations and the attitudes and which ones are better than the other. So also reflect on how to do that. And just also for your information, there are also like scientific scales which allow us to measure the level of and the type of motivation of different members and help identifying the different archetypes. So it's not just subjective, it's also, there are scales to do that. And also the third point that you need to consider is look into the individuation on a continuum, reflect on you as a family member. Where do you find yourself? Where do you find the other members of your family? Was it the case when you were younger, and how did this all evolve, and how? Consider this circumplex model of the family marital systems, where you can identify the type of the family, understand where does your family stand, how did it evolve over time, because it's not and it's never static, and how should it evolve to get healthier intergenerational dynamics. So and also, encouraging I encourage you and encouraging the family members you work with to learn more by, doing interviews. Like, interviews might seem very, very formal, but, just, have a chit chat around the fire in the evening, and not only talk about, traditional stuff, but, also storytelling, tell about, what were the crises in the past, how things used to be done, how about grandpa, and how are things were shaped in the past. Sometimes also it's worth what we call genogram. We're drawing genograms, which is the family tree. But on the family tree, we are able to add specific information about, for example, the hobbies, the careers, the achievements of different family members, and also to show the quality of relationships among family members. And this is very useful because this will allow us to tell a story altogether, but also to see whether there were dysfunctional intergenerational dynamics in the past generations, because usually these are replicated over generations. So for instance, in the burlap case, we're able to see whether, the previous generations also had difficulties during the succession process. Perhaps William's father wanted also to study art and design, and his father didn't let him do that. And, just open this black box and talk about it, and this will help break the pattern and move towards the healthier relationship. So looking at the family tree and discussing that family tree helps a lot too. Again, discuss with your peers from other family businesses, work on intergenerational communication towards the healthy climate of open communication. There are also lots of tools to improve communication. We don't have the time to do it all at a time now, but also, you know, be curious in learning about different methods. Like there's the nonviolent communication method, which is very useful, for example. So this is one among others. So this whole learning approach is worth looking into. So yes, I can see that time is flying. So thank you so much for listening, and happy to take any questions or comments, or you know, anyone would like to share experiences.
Hi, Rania. Thank you very much for today. A challenge, I am
Hi.
second generation. A challenge that I see is that the creators of the company find it very hard to let go. It's very normal, I think. So that's a challenge that they face, and I understand. But there's another challenge that when the parents have 2 or 3 siblings, taking a decision of who's going to be the leader if something happens, if they had to check out of this world themselves, is postponed. It's as if I tell sibling number 3 that in front of the other 2 siblings that he or she is the chosen one to be the leader in my succession plan, then the other 2 siblings might get offended, or I might create issues between them. I might create aggro just because the directors and the founders of the company decided that sibling number 1 or 2 or 3 should be the one who leads, although he or she would have been defined along the years with his or her track record to be a potential leader. It's not, the decision is not taken, so it's postponed. We'll wait. Let's see. We'll do it tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, maybe in 2 years. What happens is, as sometimes happens, that the leader, the founder of the company, it checks out without any warning, and then it's chaos. So there is no direction. Then, if no direction in leadership was given, who's going to lead? Who's going to command the ship out of the port? I practice martial arts. My sensei, who was 64 at the day, had 3 upcoming black belt top athletes. He never delegated to one of them. He had to be taken to hospital because of back operation, and the group finished right there and then. No one took over. No one could continue doing the lessons. Nothing. And this happens sometimes in family businesses. So I understand that these are challenges, but something I don't want to do growing up is that if I define who from my siblings will be the leader, I will not stand back. I will take action, come what may. I will have a backbone and address issues while I'm alive. It doesn't make sense to put it under the carpet and then see tomorrow, because no one of us here, sorry to break the news, has a guarantee tomorrow. So if there's planning to be done, and this is about planning, it's always good to identify who is going to be the leader, and not leader now, but in case of my absence as the founder of the company, then there's a plan. You go to emergency mode, not who. Oh, wait. Who said what? Where is it written? Where? But no. So these are unfortunate instances where there isn't continuity. There could be a very good strategic plan on paper. No one was informed officially. and no one got a handover. So what happens now? I mean, the siblings will say, okay, one will say till 2 and 3, 1 and 2 will say till 3, but who told you you're going to lead us? We were only ready to follow our parents who were the first gen. So what happens then? I am just highlighting this because this is a reality. I noticed someone wrote in the chat, rightly so, easier said than done. But by delaying, it does not become easier. By delaying of who is going to take over my business as founder, doesn't get resolved by buying time. Time would be against me if I'm the founder. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story, and you are highlighted actually different elements, and I would like to start with the things hidden under the carpet. In families, there are certain informal norms of behavior and sometimes secrets or difficult conversations are put aside, and this doesn't contribute to the continuity of the family business for sure. So there is really need for the family members to come together and to start a conversation somewhere, right? So nothing will change overnight. In the chat previously, I remember Panikos was mentioning governance. And at some point also, someone mentioned a family charter or protocol. So one of the things that can be done is to start reflecting on what are the expectations of each family member, and if needed, to bring in someone from the outside, to bring an expert that will, make a presentation to the family, just share experiences, and then, try to dig deeper into each one's expectations, to identify those expectations, and try to see what is common among all the family members' expectations that can, be a building ground to a vision. What is a shared dream of those family members? Maybe this is something that has nothing to do with the family business, but it's fine. Maybe we can create something and connect it to the family business. Maybe we can have different roles for the family members in connection with the business. Maybe there's no family members to take the lead of the business, but they can be responsible shareholders in the future, and we can, have a non-family member on board as, the CEO. So there are lots of options, but those options need to be explored based on a clear understanding of the expectations of the family members. So what is hidden on the carpet? What are the perspectives and thoughts, of the family members? So let's put them, in the light, and take our time to try to find a common ground. And another also way to do it is also to think about the values of the family. So what binds us together? What do we believe in terms of values, which is common to everybody? And this is also, another way to start building something together in the future. So I guess the support of an external advisor or expert in the beginning to help identify those expectations and start some work is can be needed. But if there is a reluctance from family members to bring an advisor from the beginning, encouraging them to attend webinars like this one, to go to conferences, meet other family members, is a good first step, so they know that family businesses are important, and we need to do something about about our family business and what we are doing all together. Hope this helps. Do we have other questions or comments?
We had some comments already from before. Rania, I don't know if you can see them.
Yes.
You have a lot of comments about the general webinar, of course. One of the comments by, sorry, give me 1 second because it's not shown, by Mr. Joy Fitzpatrick, was to invite students to spend time at the family business during the summer holidays. We were surprised with the tangible contribution our grandchildren made, resulting in increased efficiency and increased sales and promotion. And other people were commenting on this suggestion, that it was a nice suggestion.
And
can we also please, Rania, remind people if they can spend 3 or 4 minutes to answer our evaluation questionnaire for today's webinar? You can find the link on the chat, please. It would be great to have your comments and feedback.
Yes,
Rania.
Yeah, that would be great. So I will put the link again. And meanwhile, I can see we have a very interesting question by I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, about what if there is no interest by the next generation in being involved in the business. So I think that's also a common situation. It's better in this case not to push the next generation to come to the business and then not find their way and not really contribute, and rather supporting the next generation to do something they like to do. At the same time, build on their passion, on their expertise to feed some business practices. In some cases, maybe the next generation can just contribute to the philanthropic activity of the family business because they have some ideas. So they will be, they should be encouraged in doing that. In some cases, families support with a financial fund, which could be called an entrepreneur fund, the next generation members to start their own businesses, and the family can support financially, can do some mentoring. So this is also another way to help the next generation do something about what they like while staying connected with the family. So there are different ways of indirectly involving them. And also, sometimes it's just good to be an owner, but a responsible one. So to help making the right decisions while feeling, those, while feeling connected to the business and having those feelings of obligation in contributing to the family continuity through decisions as owners. Thank you, Kevin, for your comment. So I hope this helped, Effie. So
Can I say something, Rania?
Sure.
Okay, this subject of Kevin was raised last week, where Colin suggested that in the case of different siblings running the business, this could be narrowed down by defining the responsibility and decision-making process of each sibling. But of course, in the end, there must be one leader. So in my draft charter, which I'm drafting, I have completed the succession planning, but I'm still trying to wind up the family business charter, and I'm waiting for the seminars to end because I'm getting a lot of points which are very, very valuable points, so that I include them. So eventually I'll try and work on this idea, but then I've taken notes of your suggestions so that we can find a common ground as to who will be the final person. And someone, as Kevin said, that the captain has to decide. So maybe even after defining the different decision-making processes, at some point in time, one must take the blunt and take responsibility. So I think what you suggested is a good way forward to opt. And of course, obviously, some may have to rope in some external persons or advisors to find out the situation in the business and also to convince the other parties to remove any doubts, because sometimes it is fear, you see, to remove the fear that if they appoint the wrong leader, then the business will go bankrupt, you see. So I think these points are very valid to explore for the future in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you for this great comment reminding us about Colin's suggestions last week. Also, I think you would also need to keep in mind that co-leadership is a possibility, and it can work very well if the family members have complementary types of expertise. And, So also this is a consideration to have. And also, again, it's important for the leader to have some characteristics and some competencies, but to have also the right motivation. Let's not forget about it, because otherwise things might fire back in the future. So, and the charter, I encourage you also to co-create it with the family members. So of course, it's good to have some great ideas lined up with this webinar and with other experiences that people can share with you. But it's important to, instead of, giving the charter to the family members and telling them, what do you think? Just, sign it up. But at some point, having these ideas in mind and telling them, let's do it together. They will feel more included, and this will help them also abide by it, because a family charter is has a moral value and no legal value. So it's important to include them in the process too.